house and the aquaponics greenhouse, and chickens and bees. So for $295,000, it's really a great deal. And it's a little house. I think it's 3 bedrooms. It's not a huge house, but boy, oh, I hope somebody nice buys it and wants to farm up here.
Wow. And your place, how big is where you live?
My place is 2 2/3 acres.
2 2/3 acres. That's good enough size, yeah?
Yeah.
And do you do any?
There's really a lot of room. It's like 500 feet from the north side to the south side and a couple hundred feet from east to west about.
Wow. And do you have gardens as well? I can imagine.
I do. I have, when this whole COVID thing started, I immediately put in a 30 by 30 garden with 9 raised beds and a big, 8-foot fence. And then I'm going to do one more fenced garden, possibly fence the orchard. I'm not sure.
Wow. And you have an orchard, you said?
Yeah, I have a small orchard. It's just maybe 100 by 100 feet. And it's got apples and cherries and peaches and plums. And it hasn't produced very much.
Oh.
Are these full-size trees or are they?
Yeah, they're pretty, they're full size.
Cool.
That's wonderful. That's like a dream for us because we live in a townhouse.
Well,
we have fruit trees, but they're dwarf trees in the back.
Yeah, I have some, I put in some over the years. I should send you guys, I'm just working on putting this together. This is, let's see if I can.
We have Monica from Topanga, California joining us.
Oh, okay. So here it is, kind of. It's 2 pieces of paper.
Oh, wow. Well, we'll have to.
Yeah, you should come up and visit sometime.
Oh, wow.
No, it's really only about an hour.
It's an hour from Sterling, Virginia.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it takes me about an hour and 15 minutes to get to Reston.
And do you come here often?
No, I don't. I thought I was going to be doing a lot of shopping and stuff in Reston once I moved up here. But if I need to go someplace, I go over to Frederick because it's closer.
Ah, wow. Well, we have more and more people joining us. Monica, Faith, Sandy, welcome. And
do you have a link for the Zoom call tonight? Because there's an email from somebody who didn't get the registration.
She didn't get the registration link. Yeah. So if I resent all the let me see. I'll look at the email and I'll do it in the back end. I'll see if I can help her out. But before that, we have one more minute. Welcome everybody who came in early. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us, your evening with us. I know Faith. Oh, Faith, kindly remind me where you're calling from again. Faith Roberts, right? Do you remember, Dave?
I'm in Vienna, Virginia.
Oh, right Vienna, that's right. So close.
Yeah.
So
here we go.
Region. And Sandy is from Arizona and Monica's from California.
Wow.
Yes. And Diane is from West Virginia.
Yeah, just the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, but I used to live in Reston, Faith, so right up the road from you.
Okay, all right.
Yes. And so just a little introduction. Thank you for spending your night with us, learning about fermentation. Diane's fermentation journey began back in 2011 with a bumper crop of cucumbers and a little internet research. So she herself is a gardener. She was talking about her gardens earlier. She herself is a permaculture designer. We had the same teacher, and that's how I came to know her. She has been fermenting ever since and enjoying the benefits of fermented foods. Along the way, she became a master food volunteer with the Virginia Cooperative Extension Service and a permaculture designer. As a master food volunteer, Diane taught classes in home food preservation, including fermentation. In 2014, Diane moved, as she said, to the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, where she lives and gardens on her homestead with her 94-year-old father. So welcome, Diane. And we'll keep your dad in our prayers, at least.
Oh, thank
because
you.
he's right now recovering just from being dehydrated and in the hospital. So we really appreciate you giving this talk despite those circumstances.
Well, you know, with COVID, I can only go visit him once a day. And so it's, you know, I'd be here anyway. So this is great. Anyway, so they're just, okay, so they're just a few of us. What I'm going to go through a PowerPoint presentation about fermentation. And if you have questions, just since there's so few of us, just pop in and wave and ask me your question. So I'm seeing, let's see. Okay. I'm not seeing everybody. Hi. Okay. And Harriet, hi.
I thought I would dial in. Hi.
Good. Okay. All right. Now how can I see everybody? Oh, there, that looks like I can see quite a few more people. All right. I'm not really great at this technology, but let's see if we can do this. Okay, guys. So I'm going to start and assume that maybe you haven't done any type of home food preservation before. So I don't want to act like I'm talking down to you or anything, but I want to make sure I cover some safety issues and why we do this. So the home screen here has some pickles and whoops, I can't go any farther. All right, let's put that over there. Some kombucha. I've only made kombucha once, so we won't go into that. Oh, and Brian, my God, all these people I know. All righty. So there are a number of reasons for preserving food at home, especially now with COVID, but it provides healthy, nutritious local food year round. It extends the shelf life of great local produce that you can get during the spring, summer, and fall. For me, the most important thing is that it gives me complete control over what is in my food. No unwanted or hidden additives. So that's really useful. It's a great skill now more than ever. You've probably read that we have a shortage of all kinds of canning supplies. And when food preservation is done properly, it eliminates and reduces the things that can lead to spoilage in your canned food, canned or preserved food. So I always like to talk about safety. That comes from my Master Food Volunteer training. The greatest risk in home food preservation is botulism. And that's really more of a risk in canning, not necessarily in fermentation. But there was a case in Virginia a few years ago where we think someone fermented something and then canned it, and it killed an entire family from botulism poisoning. So you really, you want to follow when you're canning. I always say canning is a science and fermentation is an art. So when you're canning, you have to follow the rules exactly, or else you can really hurt someone. But I'm not going to go into that since we really want to talk about fermentation tonight. But you want to keep everything very clean when you're doing any type of food preservation, whether it's canning or fermenting, dehydrating, anything. You just need to keep everything clean. There's something called the temperature danger zone between 40 degrees and 140 degrees. So if your food is at that temperature, like if you have food sitting out for a long time, it can develop bacteria. And so you really need to keep your food below 40 degrees or over 140 degrees. The acid level of food is something to keep in mind when you are canning, but we won't go into that. So, whoops. All right, here we go. So fermentation is very simple. It's a low energy form of food preservation, which is one of the reasons I like it. Canning takes a lot of energy on the stove. Freezing food takes a lot of energy because you're running the freezer to freeze it. But fermentation is very low energy in the actual production of the food. Once it's completed fermenting, you do store it in the refrigerator, or if you have a cold root cellar, you can store it in a root cellar. A refrigerator temperature will keep the fermented product from over fermenting. It will still ferment a little bit, even at, below 40 degrees, but it pretty much slows the fermentation way down. So fermentation has been used throughout the world for thousands of years. They've discovered wine, which is fermented, in old crocks in the Middle East. You've heard of sauerkraut, which is, Germany, Eastern Europe, kimchi, Korea, yogurt, the Middle East, and every place else. Kosher dills, fermented and preserved, are a Middle Eastern dish. There are several methods of fermentation. You can just use salt. You can do a brine. You can use salt-free fermentation. I have never done salt-free fermentation. So the health benefits from fermented foods are many. It helps you build up your healthy gut bacteria. And it also makes nutrients bioavailable. And if you're squeamish, turn away now. But the little lactobacillus will actually pre-digest the food, which is how it makes nutrients more bioavailable. So there are little bugs in there eating your food, but it's a good thing to do. And you don't need a lot of fancy equipment. If you've got jars and lids of some type, you've really got all the equipment you need. Everybody is selling, airlocks and all this other stuff. I don't own an airlock, and I have all kinds of fermented food. Right, now let's see, let me go. Okay, so here's a couple examples of fermentation equipment. On the left is an actual crock with a well under the lid that you can see. That you can put water in there in that well once you've filled everything, and that will create a complete airlock. And there are stones in there to keep, this is probably sauerkraut, to keep the sauerkraut down out of the air. This on the right is pretty much my preferred method, just a big old canning jar. And that's another little canning jar sitting on top of it. And that will keep all of the cabbage under the level of the brine. And if you're doing something like this on the counter, you would want to put a towel, a tea towel over that so bugs and things don't get into it. Okay, now, so the method for fermentation, let me move this over here. You want to wash your jars and your lids thoroughly. Prepare and pack the food into jars. Cover with brine as needed. Make sure your food is submerged below the brine. Place the jar on a plate or shallow dish to catch any liquid. When fermentation happens, it bubbles, it creates carbon dioxide. And so there are bubbles that come out, and sometimes the water will come up and over. So you want to make sure that you've caught the liquid and so it doesn't go all over your counter. And then you allow the food to ferment until it's to your liking. Basically, I do sauerkraut for a week to 10 days. I do radishes for a couple weeks. Peppers I ferment for a long time, for 2 or 3 months. And I usually use peppers in hot sauce. And so I let them go for a long time and then make the hot sauce. So let's see. Does anybody have any questions? Am I going too fast? No? Okay.
Perfect for
Nope.
me.
Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
How do you know when salt water is brine?
Okay. There are all kinds of complicated percentage calculations that you can do. What I do is what the Oh, I've forgotten their name now. Where did I put my book? Anyway, there's a couple that's written a couple wonderful books. And they use 3 tablespoons of salt to a quart of water. I was using 2 tablespoons of salt to a quart of water, but now I use their basic recipe is 3 tablespoons of salt to a quart of water, and that makes brine. Now, for sauerkraut, which I'm going to do tonight, we're not going to add any water, hopefully, because the cabbage will release juice and that will create the brine. But you can also go online, and if you just Google brine salt percentages for fermentation, it will give you all these complicated formulas. I'm a pretty simple person, so I try to keep it simple. Any other questions? Okay, so I did pictures of some pickles to show you what this stuff looks like. And you're going to get to see the jar on the right in a few minutes. So the jar on the very left, you'll see that it's really quite cloudy. That has been fermenting for about 4 or 5 days. The jar in the middle has been fermenting for just a couple days less. And the jar on the right has been fermenting just for a few hours. So you can see that cloudiness that develops in the brine. That will eventually disappear, and you shouldn't be afraid once it starts to get cloudy. I should have said there's very little that can go wrong with fermented food. If your ferment is slimy, and I mean really slimy with stringy slime, that is something that should just, the whole thing should go out on the compost pile. That means that there's something wrong with it. It's happened to me, I think only once with some salsa. If you get really funky looking mold on it, black mold, orange mold, anything like that, you want to throw that away. There's something in fermentation called calm yeast, which I will show you a little bit of when we go over to the kitchen. And that won't hurt anything. It develops frequently on fermented peppers and pickles, and it will float on the top of your brine usually. And it looks, I don't know if you've ever sprinkled talcum powder on water, but it looks about like that. It just stays, it's powdery, it stays right on the top of the brine, and it doesn't really hurt anything. What I do to get rid of it, particularly in peppers, is I just put the jar, open up the jar, put it in the sink, and pour a little bit more brine into the jar, so the yeast will just come up and float over the jar. It's a very simple thing to do. Okay, so that's pickles. These pickles, I had pickles up until last week from last year, my 2019 pickles. And I use, let's move this down here. There we go. I use horseradish leaves to keep the pickles crisp. There's tannin in those leaves, and there's some chemical interaction that keeps the pickles crisp. So no chemical, you know, when you're canning things, there's some product that you can put in to keep your canned vegetables nice and crisp, but I don't use any of that. All right, now, okay, here's more pictures. Okay, so in the top, the picture with the 2 jars, the one on the left is just hours old. The one on the right is 2 days old. And you can see that the color of the pickles, the color of the cucumbers begins to change, and the brine gets cloudy. And then this is, all right, let me move this, whoops, move that back up. All right, so here's a picture of the jar opened. All of those little bubbles are the CO2 bubbles. And you can see that over here on the right jar. It's nice and cloudy, and those bubbles have developed. when I use those lever lock lids, which I'll be using tonight, I always try to burp those a couple times a week at least to let some of that CO2 escape. I'm not going to go over this recipe. This is just a recipe from one of my favorite books, because that's not what we're making tonight. Another thing you can do if you're interested in fermenting vegetables, I've got a thing over here. You can chop up carrots, turnips, beets. If you use beets, it will turn everything a dark purple. Celery, onions, peppers. You can just chop things up into a similar size, throw them in a jar with whatever seasonings you like, or no seasonings, cover with brine and ferment, and you will have a wonderful thing that you can add to your salads, or just eat out of the jar like pickles. Okay, now, all right, wait a minute. Okay, now that's the presentation. Anybody have any more questions? Okay.
No questions, but I did find a link for the brine calculator. I tossed it into the chat there.
Oh, okay.
If that works, yeah.
That's my brilliant cousin who is a techie.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, so that's kind of the spoken part. I'm still going to keep speaking. I'm going to go over, I'm going to move the computer over to the kitchen, and I'm going to show you how to make sauerkraut. All right, let's. Oh, now, Nikki, how can I make this really big?
Oh, stop. You can stop screen share and it'll go back to you, and Dave, you can spotlight her so her screen becomes big.
Okay, now wait a minute. Now I don't. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Stop screen share.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Try this. Oh, that's frightening. Okay. All right. Now, let me run around to the front. Can you guys see that workspace?
Yes, a little bit lower. I think you wanted when we rehearsed last Monday. Yes.
How's that?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, let me. There. Okay. All right. Now let me.
Is it what you like?
Let me put it just a little bit. Oh, no. Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right. Let me wash my hands. Okay, so now this looks kind of cloudy because it's frosty. All right, so these are the pickles. They've been in the refrigerator for 4 months now, and I actually had one today, and they're delicious. And this is when I talk about a lever top jar. This is a lever jar. These are radishes, and what happens with the radishes when you ferment them, all the color comes off the skin and makes this beautiful red brine. These are, about 6 months old. This is some just fermented mixed vegetables that I told you about from last year, and I was very pleased to open them, and they are still tasty. And there was no mold in there. Now these are fermented peppers, and I'm going to bring this over here. Wait a minute, let's see. Let me turn this light on. I don't know how well you can see, but right here, there's a little bit of a white powder-like substance on that pepper. That's what the yeast is, and that actually is down in the jar. So now this is going to show you. I better put this over here. This is going to show you what it looks like when you burp it. See the fizz?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
See the bubbles coming up? I don't know how good these cameras are, but anyway, these have been fermenting for a couple months, and I'll probably turn that into a hot sauce. And to do that, you just take the peppers out and
And you didn't have those in the refrigerator. Those were on the counter or?
no, those, yeah, these are still fermenting out on the counter. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, now let me see everything. Okay, so when you make sauerkraut, the first thing you want to do with your cabbage is take a couple leaves off the outside and save those. And I'll show you why later. And so I chopped this cabbage, and I'm trying something new. I had a bunch of radishes from the garden, and so I actually shredded some radishes to put in this. So you can see the shredded radishes, they're red, and the cabbage is right here. This should fill a quart jar. And for this size, this amount of cabbage, you want just a tablespoon of salt. So this is pink sea salt. And now the fun begins.
Is the type of salt used important or?
Yeah, you want to use sea salt or any salt that doesn't have any iodine in it, because the iodine can interfere with the fermentation. A little bug just crawled into my dish. Oh, well, okay. It's a fruit fly. They don't eat much. So you need to break down the walls of the cabbage and the radishes for this particular type of ferment with just salt and no brine added. So I'm just going to keep pounding this. And depending on how watery the cabbage is, you might have to do it for quite a while, or you might not. This is beginning to give off liquid pretty quickly. And what I'm going to do with this, this will ferment, and the lactic acid will form. The lactobacillus will produce lactic acid. Lactobacillus is a salt-tolerant bacteria, and so it can grow in a salty environment, and the salt inhibits other bad bacteria from growing. So you create a salty environment, a salty anaerobic environment, and bad bacteria does not thrive, and the lactobacillus starts growing and multiplying, and they start creating lactic acid by excuse me, excuse me, I need to get a drink of water. So the lactobacillus will eat through the walls of the cabbage and form and produce lactic acid. Now, and this is just in a few minutes. Can you guys see how damp that is? I don't know what it looks like, but it's getting very damp.
Can you remind us why you're breaking down the cell walls for the cabbage?
So it will release the liquid.
So Diane, I've tried to do the sauerkraut in the past, and I've chopped them up really fine, and I don't get much liquid. It doesn't cover the brine. Does that mean I have to add some brine to that?
Yes, yes. If you can't get it to cover the top, you have to add brine. And again, you can just use that 3 tablespoons to a quart of water brine. Okay, this is doing pretty well. Let me see, I need my funnel. So another thing, Nikki, that might have been the problem, when you put it in the jar, you really have to press it down. So.
And you didn't even have to wait for the juice to come out. You didn't.
No,
It came out.
yeah, and another way to make sauerkraut and make the juice come out is just leave it in a, cut it up, put it in a plastic bag and put your salt in and massage it really well in the plastic bag. Okay, so you got to be very careful in this step that you don't break your jar. So no pounding here, but just pressure. Yeah, there's some. Let's see how we're doing. There it comes. Shout out questions.
Does the freshness of your vegetable, does it matter how fresh it is when you pickle, ferment it?
It should be fairly fresh. You want to ferment food that you would eat. Now, a lot of people, myself included, if I've got some things that are not quite as fresh, a good way to avoid throwing those away is to ferment them. But you should never ferment anything that's spoiled.
Thank you.
Diane, when you're doing pickles, is it better to keep the cucumbers whole or cut?
It is.
Or is it just preference?
No, it's better to keep them whole. You do have to cut off the blossom end of the cucumber because it has an enzyme in it that will cause the pickle to go mushy, and that's even with canned pickles.
Okay.
But you just cut off like about 1/16 of an inch. I'll send you my recipe, Kelly. In fact, I'll send it to Nikki so she can post it. Okay, now let's see. I don't know how well you guys can see this. Well, you can't see that at all. Can you
Wow.
see that there's liquid?
Yep.
Okay, all right. There we go. So this will actually probably turn pink because of the radishes in there. You know, the first time I saw sauerkraut being made, I always wanted to make it, and I never did because everything I read, it just seemed too complicated, you know, changing weights and doing all this stuff. And then I was all day gardening seminar at Green Springs Gardens in Annandale. It's a Fairfax County park. And this woman said, this is how you do it. Takes 3 days. And you actually can get a very mild sauerkraut in 3 days. But I let mine go a little bit longer. Okay. So now There we go. That's going to be good enough because I'm going to actually use a glass jar to weight this down. But let's see. So, yeah. There you go. You can see the liquid in there. All right, now another trick for fermentation, once you start filling your refrigerator up with ferments, is you can, just like sourdough starter, you can use brine from your other ferments as a starter. We're just taking a little bit of the juice from the radish. And I have to tell you guys, fermented radishes, fermented radishes taste great, but they smell really bad. They have
And they're fabulous in martinis.
Yeah, they are fabulous in martinis, that's right. So here we go. Okay, so this is all ready to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the outer lid of the cabbage, or outer leaf of the cabbage, and put it in here. Now that will keep the sauerkraut itself under the brine, particularly when I add this little dish. And the added benefit of using a leaf like this, if you do develop any mold or anything, it will be on this top leaf and you can just throw that away. So now let me get the lid back on here. And because this isn't all the way full, I've got room. So I'm going to take this little custard cup, which fits perfectly in here. You've got to be very careful. Press that down. And close it. And I will put it in a dish. Yeah. And I'll just leave this out on the counter for at least 10 days. And then sauerkraut. And hopefully it will be nice and pink. And I can put it in the refrigerator and eat it.
Diane had another question.
Yeah.
So you use the grape leaf or the cabbage leaf for the sauerkraut, but I don't see it on any of your other brines or
Ferments?
ferments.
No, these don't have any. The dill pickles have a horseradish leaf.
To keep it crispy.
And that keeps it crispy, but it also keeps everything below the brine. So this is a horseradish leaf. Somebody asked me, where can I get horseradish leaves? And I said, well, my garden. You want to grow pickles, or if you want to grow pickles, if you want to do fermentation, you, for pickles in particular, you want horseradish, figs, oak leaves, anything that has not been sprayed or treated with chemicals. You can just wash it off. And I always put one in the bottom, and then I add my spices, and then I start putting the pickles in. I had a few cucumbers that got really big. And so these are not super crunchy because they're cut, but the cucumbers that I leave whole are generally quite crunchy and last quite well.
But you say you cut off the top bit of the cucumber, the
blossom end. So there's the end that has the stem on it that's attached to the vine. And then the end where the flower was, you take about 1/16 of an inch off of that end because there's an enzyme in the cucumber that will cause it to go mushy if you don't get that cut off.
Okay, thank you. Wow,
Diane,
thank you.
Okay.
Speaking of spices, when would you put like caraway in the sauerkraut?
You can do just about anything. We're finished in the kitchen, so I'm just gonna come back over here and sit down, and then we can chat. Let's see. Oh, I know what I wanted to do. I'm sorry for that view. Yeah. Reminds me. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. All right. No, I am not. What's his name? Jeffrey Toobin.
Stop it.
Yikes. Okay, this is one of my favorite little books called Preserving Food Without Freezing or Canning. And it is a collection of recipes. It's in English, but it's a collection of recipes from a French organic farm in the southwest of France. And it's in English. It's edited by Deborah Madison, who's a big cookbook writer, a vegetarian cookbook writer. And then this is another really great book, Fermented Vegetables, by the Shockies. There are a couple out in California. And the reason I love this book is this goes through everything. If you're going to buy one cookbook about fermentation, this is the one to get. And they, in the back of it, they have a bunch of recipes. So they tell you how to use all your ferments. So it's wonderful. They have a particularly good salad that is German white sausage with a radish, fermented radishes, and dill pickles. It sounds kind of gross, but it is really out of this world. So, we have plenty of time. Oh, can you see the name of the book again? Yes. Okay, it's Fermented Vegetables by Kirsten and Christopher Shockey. And I gave Nikki a bibliography of all of the books that I like to use. And the one thing that I didn't do, but I will send to Nikki, is my own recipe for fermented dills. And I've fiddled around with it for quite a while, and I like it the way it is now. So I'm more than happy to share that with people.
Wow, thank you so much.
We've got plenty of time. Oh wait, there's things on the chat.
I just put the name of the book. And,
Oh, okay.
Preserving Food Without Freezing or Canning.
Yeah, this is a fun book. So this has everything. It's salt, oil, sugar, alcohol, vinegar, drying, cold storage, and lactic fermentation. So it's got really, really interesting recipes.
I like both of those books.
Yeah.
So I was going to pickle my green tomatoes. Have you done that before?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And where do you eat them? Where do you incorporate them in all your meals, or you just put a little side? It's like a side.
Yeah, you can chop them up and put them in a salad, or you can use it just like you would, a pickle sandwich. I've been trying to this one ferment that I have. Let me get this. This guy has peppers and garlic and carrots. That may be about it. I don't think there are any tomatoes in here, but I take that out and chop it really fine and use it as a relish on sandwiches.
Nice. Wow. Well, thank you so
So
much.
you can do tomatoes even with the acid level of those? Or
Yeah, tomatoes I've done. I'm not really a fan of fermented tomatoes. The Shockies have a recipe called cherry bombs for cherry tomatoes, and I've done it, and I found that I just didn't really like the flavor all that much. But I have done salsa before, so you just chop up everything like you would for salsa, except I leave out the cilantro and put that in at the very end when I'm getting ready to serve it, and put a tablespoon or 2 of salt in a jar. And that goes really fast. That's like a 1 to 2 to 3 day process. Because tomatoes ferment really quickly. And I mean, you could end up with tomato wine if you let it go too long because of the sugar in the tomatoes.
Lots of questions coming in now from Andrea. Do all
Okay, let me-
fermented vegetables taste like sauerkraut?
No,
Do you put any sugar in your brine?
no. Let me see where the chat is. Oh, there it is. Okay. Can you give us tips on how you did the vegetables? You mean these vegetables? I cut the carrots into little chunks. Let's see, there they are. And I took the stems off the peppers, and I took the skin off the garlic cloves, and that's it. And then that again is that 3 tablespoons of salt to a quart of water brine. Okay, I'm looking at these. Where did I purchase the pounding tool? That's a wonderful family story. My father, who is 94 years old, told me, I've had that for a number of years from my parents. Daddy told me that it was my grandmother's potato masher. Then my mother told me sometime later that no, my brother actually found it by the side of the road. So, go figure. Either it's a family heirloom or roadkill, but it works really well.
Wow.
So, but you can use other potato mashers. Let me grab this one. If you can't find an old antique wood one, this type of potato masher will work.
Oh, okay.
So
Great.
that will work.
Okay.
And like I said, you can also you don't have to pound it. You can either keep the cabbage in a plastic bag and massage it, or you can just massage it in the bowl. Our hands
Okay.
really some of our best cooking implements. Just make sure you.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's see what else would be the best recipe to use for a vegetable averse family as a first time experience. That's going to be tough because not everybody likes the flavor of fermentation. It's sour. So one thing I want to make clear to everybody, when you taste kosher dills, real kosher dills on a street corner in New York, there is no vinegar involved in that. The vinegary flavor is the lactic acid that's produced. So in my pickles, it will taste like a pickle that has vinegar on it, but there is no vinegar. The only vinegar that I use in most of my ferments is when I'm doing hot sauce. So, and I don't use the vinegar in the actual ferment. I ferment the peppers, and then I throw them in the Vitamix and grind them up with a little bit of brine. And as the last step before I put it in a jar, I will put a little bit of white vinegar in. I should have brought up some. I do have 1 jar of hot sauce. I have jars.
Thanks, Kelly, for sharing that chow chow recipe.
Oh,
Oh,
somebody.
you're welcome.
Okay, this is hot sauce from last year, and this is kind of a semi-mild hot sauce with all different kinds of peppers in it. I've got fish peppers, which are hot, and Hungarian spice peppers, which are not hot, they're just spicy. Ash County pimento, some bells, and some Marconi peppers. And again, I fermented the peppers for a few months and then just ground them up and made the hot sauce. But I've got hot sauce downstairs in the refrigerator that's from 2012 from Caribbean red hots, which are between a ghost pepper and a Scotch bonnet. And somebody told me that that could be used as a weapon. But I haven't done that yet, but it is really hot. You can only, unless you're really, you really do lots of hot food, you can put like a little knife tip into a bowl of into a pot of chili. Otherwise, it will really knock your socks off.
I feel like your cellar must be like a wine cellar, but for ferments.
It kind of is.
12.
It kind of is, and I keep adding refrigerators down there, which is not very environmentally friendly. But I do have a 10 kilowatt solar system, so I'm not using a huge amount of electricity from the grid.
So, you mentioned adding the vinegar to your salsas. Is there a reason for that? Is it just flavor, or does it?
The hot sauce. No, it's just
yeah.
because what the recipe said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed like when people make ketchup, you also add vinegar, and that's kind of like, you're right. That's kind of what daunted me about fermenting, was that I didn't realize it was as simple as just 3 tablespoons of salt and a quart of water, because when you see the recipes with sugar and vinegar in the ferment, in the pre-ferment before it becomes the ferment. So at least thank you for clarifying that you don't need the vinegar.
Yeah, no, you don't need vinegar. I have a recipe for a Middle Eastern recipe for turnip pickles, and they put vinegar in from the beginning, and I tried that, and it's fine, but it's still basically fermented, but with the addition of vinegar during the fermentation process.
Other than tomatoes, just being a fast ferment, is there anything you would recommend not trying to ferment? Squash, I was thinking, or any really soft vegetable.
I don't know about that. Let me look. I mean, I wouldn't think to ferment squash. Let me see what the Shockies have in here. They've got arugula, asparagus, basil, green beans, beets, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, burdock, cabbage, cauliflower, celery, chard. It looks like they ferment just about everything. Sunchoke.
All right.
Spinach. They don't have any winter squash. Oh my gosh. Zucchini and other summer squash, parsnips, peas, peppers, jicama, kohlrabi. I've done kohlrabi before. I've done baby eggplant, and that turned out fabulous. That made a really nice side dish pickle.
Okay.
But yeah, there's not mushrooms, there's mustard greens, everything.
Okay.
We recently discovered that when we pickled the okra, we liked it better than eating it just, with our recipes.
Yeah, and you can ferment okra too. Let's see, chow chow. Yeah, you could do chow chow or giardiniera, the Italian pickled vegetable relish. You could do that just by fermentation. Oh, Kelly, your cat's brother is screaming to get in from the garage. I'll leave them out there for a little while longer. Anyway, let's see. Any more questions? On the PowerPoint presentation, I've got my email. There we go. I'll put that back. And just make sure if you want to send me an email, please try to remember to put fermentation in the subject line so I don't think it's junk mail and just discard it.
Oh, Diane, bread and butter pickles or sweet pickles? That's not fermentation, right?
No, that's not. And I made some bread and butter pickles this year. I found I just had tons of cucumbers, and I found just a refrigerator recipe, so I didn't even can them. I
Oh, okay.
put everything in a jar, but that was with a lot of vinegar.
Got it. Okay.
I want the bread and butter icebox pickle recipe.
All right, I'll have to, let's see. Let me see.
I'd like to try it using stevia instead of sugar.
Oh yeah,
Oh, that'd be interesting.
bread and butter refrigerator pickles. Refrigerator, I think this is probably the one I used. Let's see. Yeah, this looks like it. I think this is it. Okay, copy. Now let me. Okay, there's the.
Thank you.
There we go. All right, any more questions?
I have two questions, quick.
Yes.
Please?
One is, where would you get some of those jars that you were using, Diane? And second, I missed the very beginning. I wonder if the group that's hosting this could say a little bit about why they're hosting this. And
Oh, okay. Yeah, Harriet, I'll send you a link. I think it's, well, here, let me type this here. I'm pretty sure it's Everything Kitchens. I used to get them at the Container Store, but since we don't have a Container Store here, I found a whole bunch of them at a website called Everything Kitchens, and they have a really good price on them.
Well, thank you very much for asking that, Harriet. This is Nikki. My name is Nikki, and my husband David is the other techie on this call. And we founded a company called Permaculture Gardens after we had taken a course on permaculture, since Diane and I have the same teacher, because we ourselves found allergies and health issues led us to growing our own food, and we just were tearing our, oh, hello Smokey. we were just having like a lot of trouble growing our own food. But when we found permaculture, we discovered that it was so much easier, and it was like a shortcut, and we thought, we don't want to keep this to ourselves, so we wanted to spread this knowledge of permaculture, gardening in particular, because we live in a townhouse. We live on 1/40th of an acre, like 1,600 square feet, and we grow 25% of our fruits and veggies. So we get about 300 pounds from our backyard with an HOA and things like that. And the reason that we do this is every month we want to give free educational webinars that have to do with permaculture or gardening or food preservation and those principles. So in the past, we've done how to set up a food forest, composting,
Cool.
what else? Whole house agriculture, bees. We did a whole webinar on bees and canning, and it was another webinar. We did lawns into meadows, something of how to do meadow, and those replays of those webinars can be found on our website at the webinars section, gardening. So growmyownfood.com is our website, and we
Great
have a
URL. Very nice. Good for you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. I think we covered all the questions. Have you ever used the Mason Top kits? I think Diane has already answered that question.
I just use, oh, let's see, I don't know where I am. Can you guys still see me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I frequently use just these plastic things. I doubt if you can even find these in this age of shortages of canning equipment.
Could I just use like what my peanut butter jar or
Yeah.
yeah, I just kind of use, I'm trying to use those things. Although I do like your weight, Diane. I wish I had that same weight. I think you can purchase those weights as well, like those glass weights.
Oh yeah, it's a little French 4-ounce custard cup, but I literally save all my jars. So you know, I have hundreds and hundreds of jars up here and in the basement. The only thing about these jars, the metal lid sometimes will rust just a little bit, so you can't use this forever. I'm also using now the Tatler reusable canning jar lids are plastic, but they're BPA free. And so that is also a nice way, but you use a regular band for canning jars to hold that down to the jar.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And Brian, you said you have a video for your townhouse garden. Well, we often, we do have a YouTube channel, which is not very developed. We do have, let's see, an Instagram account, permaculture_garden, and we do tours, short tours of our garden there. So, but thank you for asking. I probably should have an official video of garden tour.
Yeah, I live in a townhouse now, so I'm wondering how I can do some gardening myself. So
yeah, and ours is shaded. We grow pawpaws back there.
Oh, you've got pawpaws, great.
Yeah.
You know who might do a video webinar for you is Neil Peterson.
Who is that? We'll talk after.
Yeah.
The guy developed the kind of popularized pawpaws.
Oh, really? Is he the one who wrote the book?
He didn't write the book, but he is a major, he's Mr. Pawpaw, and he lives up here. He's a friend of mine. He lives up here in Harper's Ferry.
Oh, wow. Okay. We will get in touch. Thank you. We'd love to connect with everyone, you know, who is, and just teach as many people as we can about the benefits of gardening and permaculture. And so with that, Monica, my YouTube channel, I'm looking at it now, but I don't know how to share like my channel. Permaculture Gardens. I will send it in the email. I have 2 more minutes. So Dave, if you can quickly find the link to the YouTube and post it on the
Diane, I just wanted to show you your nephew.
Oh, Cole, hi, baby.
Are they brothers, Cole and
Yes.
Smokey?
Yeah,
They are.
Belle is the sister. Yeah.
That is too cute.
Oh,
Thank you for being with us, Diane. And
You're so
family.
welcome.
Thank you for hosting.
My
Yeah,
pleasure.
Thanks, Nikki. If you ever want to do something else, I'd be happy. I'd be game for it again.
You're
Thanks
so
for
gracious.
coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.